what is it about some of the most common vices like drinking or weed smoking or whatever that have become really just, you get a pass in culture if you do those things, or even some of it, quite frankly, is encouraged. What is it about those things that's going to damage somebody's, whether it's mental fitness, as you call it, or just metabolic health? You've talked a lot about oxygen transportation and mitochondria. Like, are the vices that really mess people up, are they things that mess with oxygen transportation? Like what, or do you think that that's not true and people can drink and stay up late and do recreational drugs? I'm not talking about somebody who's like shooting heroin. But I'm saying the ones that like culturally people are like, yeah, no, there's no big deal. Do you think they are a big deal?
Well, number one, I think they're a big deal, and I think they're a big deal because your purpose isn't big enough, right? Because if the purpose is big enough, then that stuff pales so far in comparison that, you know, like anything that would take me off my game even momentarily, and I think you get a pass in society for it, sure. But if we go really to the root cause of this, or the root drivers of this, like if you said to me, Gary, what is a mood? What is an emotional state? Like, what is it? What's happiness? What's elation, passion, joy, arousal? What is libido? I mean, what actually are they in the human body? Well, they're collections of neurotransmitters, right? Like a recipe, bound to oxygen. At least the elevated emotional states are. So if you think about, for example, all of the elevated emotional states, passion, elation, joy, arousal, libido, kind of all the hell yeah, I won the lottery emotions. They all have one thing in common. They have oxygen as a part of their molecular structure. All right, this is why nobody has ever woken up laughing. Right? You haven't woken, no human being has ever woken out of a deep sleep laughing. Why? Because you don't have the oxidative state to experience laughter. But can you wake up angry? Sure. I mean, if you want to do a really cool experiment tonight, just pinch your spouse while she's in a deep sleep.
It sounds like a very bad idea, Gary.
Yeah, no, I said you do the experiment, not me. That's why I'm using you as the guinea pig, Tom. And why is it? That's because anger and despair and jealousy and resentment, these are very low, not only are they low frequency emotions, but they're low oxidative emotions, right? So they don't require an elevated oxidative state. And so very often what happens is people have a hard time maintaining elevated emotional states. So they reach elevated emotional states like a heart monitor, right? Not like rolling hills where they can stay in an elevated mood for a prolonged period of time, but they reach it like a heart monitor and they fall. And why is that? It's because their physiology drags them into the state where it most comfortably exists. So now it is harder to push yourself into these emotional states. One of the ways to get there is drugs and alcohol. One of the ways to get there is like promiscuity or like dramatic activity, right? Shocking activity that actually gets you into that emotional state. You try to hold on to it and it falls. And this is why lots of people will spend a lifetime doing the right things, like trying to journal, pray. They develop a morning routine. They try to focus on positive thinking. They go to the right seminars. They try to put themselves in the right rooms. And they can't seem to maintain that elevated emotional state. It's because their physiology is dragging them back down into the state where you most comfortably exist. And so now if we talk about, well, what are some of these recipes like? Well, what is happiness? And this is an exact recipe, but let's say happiness is so much norepinephrine, so much epinephrine, so much dopamine, so much serotonin, boom, you have the emotion happiness. Okay, well, what if you have an issue in the gut? Just methylating one of those neurotransmitters, right? So take serotonin, for example. 90% of the serotonin in our bodies is right here.
So crazy.
If you don't have it here, you can't have it here. So very often, the absence of certain emotional states doesn't begin in the outside environment. Like anxiety rarely begins in your outside environment. It almost always begins with your physiology, and you can prove this. So let's say, for example, that you're having a difficult time methylating serotonin. What does that mean? It means turning an amino acid called tryptophan into the neurotransmitter serotonin. Or dopamine, the main driver of behavior, turning phenylalanine and tyrosine into the neurotransmitter dopamine. Well, you don't have a mood disorder. You don't have a mental illness. You are missing a raw material that's required to assemble certain emotional states. It's just like going to a bakery chef and saying, listen, you could bake whatever you want. You just can't use butter. Okay, well, it doesn't sound like a big deal, right? It's only one ingredient. But if you think of the number of recipes that would affect, cookies, pastries, pies, brownies, what have you, just by removing that one ingredient. It's no different than going to a human being and saying you can be in whatever emotional state you want, you just can't use serotonin. Okay, well, that just wiped out a whole tier of emotion. And that's why, part of my message is about physiology and diet and what we can do to naturally restore proper methylation of neurotransmitters, the creation of these neurotransmitters so they are readily available for us to assemble mood, so we don't have deficits that cause us to seek the types of behaviors that short-term spike those moods.
Dude, I love that. I have said many, many, many times on this show that I want my tombstone
Maybe I got it
to
from you.
read. No, I didn't say that. What I've said many, many times is on my tombstone, I wanted to say you're having a biological experience. And the reason that I bring this whole thing up is that I think people fail to understand that they're having a biological experience, that they're going to experience their entire life through the lens of how they're maintaining their biology. And any, I'll call it a vice, but like I don't even think of it like that. Anything that you're doing, whether it's just for fun, you're going out to hang out with your friends, you're having drinks, because drinking makes me feel like I'm suppressing the urge to dance on a table. It feels awesome. Like it is a wonderful feeling. And if it didn't have negative consequences to me from a longevity perspective, from an ability to think clearly perspective, I would do it a lot. I have no moral problem with it whatsoever.
Right.
But you're having a biological experience. And once people understand that life is you trying to modulate your brain states, that's it. Like you're playing with your emotions. Why do you go watch a movie? Because it plays with your emotions in a way that we find pleasurable. Why do you play a video game? Because it plays with your neurological state. Dude, I have seen videos of a moose getting drunk on fermented apples that have fallen off the tree or whatever they were. It is just hardwired in animals to modulate their own neurochemistry. This is exactly why we do drugs, why I say that people have addictions, even though most people will not think of them as addictions. You're trying to fiddle with the knobs on your brain. Like that's what this game is. And so I'm saying, hey, you're gonna fiddle with your knobs. We all are. Be very careful that the knobs that you're fiddling with do not create a state where either you're constantly chasing something so you don't feel good, right? So you have low energy and you're chasing just feeling normal, or you are getting to the point where you have brain fog and you can't think clearly because you've gone out and you've partied and you don't realize how long that takes to really get out of your system.
Right.
I mean, just on and on and on, people are doing things. My own battle with anxiety, this is one of the things that made me so eager to have you on the show. I am utterly convinced that not the sum total, but the vast majority of my anxiety is diet related.
Oh my gosh, I could
every time
totally
I figure
agree
out
with
a
you.
piece of that puzzle, I'm like, oh, my anxiety now has gotten less. And so getting people to understand the things you do are going to matter a lot. And if you're watching this channel, the odds are that you're trying to do something extraordinary in your life. And I'm telling you right now, as much as, dude, if you've never smoked weed and had sex, it is a different sport. It is amazing. I love it the most.
Yeah.
But because it has I get this is going to be very controversial. For me, if I try to do it frequently, I'm so lethargic is probably the right word. I just don't feel sharp. And if you are not at the razor's edge of your abilities, you will never be able to do anything extraordinary. And you're not going to be at the razor's edge of your ability unless you're doing all kinds of things to optimize your physiology.
Couldn't agree with you more.